This is Live from the Table, the official podcast of the world-famous Comedy Cellar, available wherever you get your podcasts, available on YouTube, and available on demand at SiriusXM. This is Dan Naturman, Comedy Cellar comic. I also work Comic Strip and Rodney's. I'm here with...
Still working Rodney's?
Yeah, I was there a few weeks ago.
Oh, good.
I like these other clubs because I don't feel the same pressure.
Continue with introduction.
Go ahead.
That was Noam. He's the owner of the Comedy Cellar. 4 showrooms in New York, a 5th one coming at some point in 2025. By the way, this will be our most Jewish podcast ever, and that's saying a lot. Periel is, of course, with us as usual. We have with us a very special guest, Jonathan Greenblatt, American entrepreneur, corporate executive, and the 6th national director and CEO of the Anti-Defamation League. And we also have a special guest, unscheduled, but he decided to stop by, and we're happy to have him. Modi, everybody. It's Modi. Just 3 sold-out shows at the Beacon recently.
Thank God.
Yes, and
Wow, Modi.
Modi also sang at Noam's father's funeral.
Yes.
And at Noam's wedding.
Really?
And at my wedding, yes.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so we are all here, and I'll take it away, Noam. I assume you brought Jonathan on for a specific reason. So.
Well, so first of all, before Modi, so first of all, it was very nice of you to sing at my wedding and the moment of my father's funeral. I haven't thought about it in a while. It was just past like the 20th anniversary of my father.
I know. Yeah.
So anyway, so
You've been
thank you.
friends a long time.
A long time, yeah.
Very long time. Yeah.
But can we start with a joke?
What
Can,
joke?
can you tell the joke and then we get to politics? The joke I whispered in your ear.
Couples having dinner. Over to the table walks a beautiful, beautiful blonde woman and gives the husband a kiss on the forehead. Says, Irving, I'll see you on Thursday. The wife says, who the hell is this? Says, this is my mistress. Your mistress? That's it, Irving. Oh, I want a divorce. Says, no problem, I'll give you a divorce. Just keep in mind, if we get divorced, there's no more penthouse on Fifth Avenue. There's no more summers in the Hamptons. There's no more winters in Palm Beach. While he's explaining to her what life would be like if they got divorced, their friend George walks in with a brunette on his arm like you never saw. And the wife says, who the hell is George with? She says, that's his mistress. She says, ours is better. That's a mistress. That's a whore.
Anyway, all right. Listen, Jonathan Greenblatt. It's a pleasure. Let me just shake your hand. Pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure's mine.
We're already getting along so well, and having drinks and stuff like that. I don't want to get into an argument with you, but
Here we go.
but
That was a very short honeymoon.
yeah, no.
I'm just going to say.
No, I think this is all good, but I want to talk about the past of the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League. Maybe actually give people an overview of what the ADL is. I don't want to assume people know
Sure.
what it is.
Well, thank you for having me here today. I mean,
Thank you
it's
very much
really
for
a
coming.
pleasure. So I'm the CEO of ADL. ADL is the oldest anti-hate organization in America. It was founded 112 years ago at a time when Jews in this country didn't have any of the privileges or rights that we really enjoy today. 100+ years ago, Jews couldn't buy homes in many parts of the country. They were legally prohibited from doing that.
Legally, like
You could write in your contract you wouldn't sell your home to a Jew.
I see.
Jews couldn't get
covenants on property.
exactly restrictive housing covenants. Jews couldn't get medical treatment in many places. Mount Sinai Hospital, which is right around the corner from here, was founded by Jewish doctors in the mid-1800s because a Jew could bleed out in front of what we now call Cornell Presbyterian. They wouldn't let him in the door. So Jews had to create their own hospitals to treat Jews because they couldn't get, service at a non-Jewish institution.
Well, what if William Shatner was bleeding out? He doesn't look that Jewish.
That's a great point. It would be tough. Paul Newman, you don't know. But generally, they didn't take Jews. Jews couldn't get into many universities, or quotas artificially kept their numbers down. You could deny service at your restaurant, your hotel to a Jew. I mean, it went on and on. And so in that environment, a man named Leo Frank came from, a Jewish New Yorker, went down to Atlanta to manage a family business. It was a pencil manufacturing facility. And while he was there managing the plant, a young non-Jewish girl was found sexually assaulted and strangled to death in the building. And they immediately blamed the Jew. Immediately. And he was not only wrongfully convicted, he was sentenced to death for a crime he clearly didn't commit. There was exculpatory evidence. Nonetheless, he was convicted. The governor intervened to commute his sentence to life imprisonment because he didn't have due process, and the mob was so enraged that they tore Leo Frank from his jail cell and they hung him from a tree. And while the body was still hanging, from the rope, the town gathered around, the whole town, and they did a barbecue underneath the body. And they took pictures, which they turned into postcards. They're called Leo Frank cards. You could still find them today in the South in antique stores. And they took the rope that they used to, again, hang him. They chopped it into pieces and they sold it off as mementos. The lynching of Leo Frank was a proud day in the South, and it's credited with reigniting the Ku Klux Klan. The other thing that it ignited really was the ADL. So ADL had been founded a couple of years earlier during the trial, and we really were catalyzed by this horrible incident. And let me be clear, black people were lynched on a regular basis in the South in ways that were brutal and horrible. But this lynching of a Jewish man really motivated the American Jewish community. And so when they created ADL, the founders, they wrote a charter, kind of like a Jerry Maguire manifesto. And in it, they wrote the words that we still use today as our mission statement. They wrote that its purpose would be to, quote, stop the defamation of the Jewish people and secure justice and fair treatment to all. Now, like in our current intersectional world, that may seem like it makes sense, but 112 years ago, the Jews didn't have, social standing, cultural influence. This is before the Lenny Bruces and the Jerry Seinfelds and the Milton Berles and the creation of the culture that we know today as Americana. The Jews were a marginalized, fragmented, weak group. They were vulnerable. And the idea that these people would say, we'll defend ourselves made sense, but that we'll also defend others, that was an audacious and bold and kind of crazy thing to say. They didn't have a leg to stand on, but they created ADL with this idea that Jews will only be safe if everyone is safe. And unless everyone is free, Jews will not be free. And so this organization, ADL, on that basis, went on to help overturn the laws that kept Jews from buying homes, to break open the quotas that kept Jews out of universities, to expose the discrimination that kept Jews, again, out of restaurants or hotels. ADL made America safer for the Jews. And then in the late 1940s, after the Second World War, ADL committed itself to the civil rights movement. When ADL filed a brief in Brown versus Board of Education, the case that desegregated our schools in favor of desegregation, it was a bold position. Mm-hmm. Many Americans supported segregation, but the leadership of ADL, my predecessors, said, no, our mission compels us, justice and fair treatment to all. So ADL stood up, and it nearly tore the organization apart, Noam. Jewish people said, this isn't our issue. The leadership of ADL said, you better believe it is. So whether it was standing up for civil rights, pushing for immigration reform, our organization stood for the LGBTQ community during the HIV/AIDS crisis in this country. When, again, people were afraid of gay people, ADL said justice and fair treatment to all. So I'm proud to be the custodian, the steward, the guardian of this really incredible legacy.
That's a huge legacy.
And you've left nothing for the rest of the podcast.
Before we continue,
There's nothing. Where else? Where are you going to chime in?
Hold on.
You gave it all away already. You gave everything away.
I just want to add, just before we get to the more serious stuff, Dan, can you just give us a list, because he talks about Jews in the 30s and 40s, how it was difficult to be Jewish. Dan is an expert at all the original names of the household name Jews. Give us a list, Dan.
I'm excited.
I didn't know I was an expert in that.
You know everyone. Woody Allen.
Well, Alan Konigsberg.
Tony Curtis.
Something Schwartz. Bernard Schwartz, I think.
Burt Lancaster. Do the ones you know.
Burt Lancaster's not Jewish.
Oh, who do you know? Come on.
I love this. Who is a Jew?
I think Lauren Bacall, that was her real name.
Really?
Oh, Dan, come on.
Harrison Ford?
You always do this. You know them all in the back of your
give
hand.
me one, and I'll give you the name.
I don't remember who you know. Who do you know?
Phyllis.
John Stewart.
John Stewart Leibowitz.
But who are the older ones? Milton Berle.
He's one.
Ralph Lauren.
Milton Berle, I don't know.
Berle was Jewish.
Milton Berle.
Yeah, he's very.
No, it wasn't, but I don't think that was his name.
Dan is so frustrating because he usually just rattles these off.
Well,
So he's not on that tonight.
It's passive aggressive. Anyway.
By the way,
Yeah.
should mention, you mentioned Leo Frank, that Candace Owens is still promoting the notion that Leo Frank was guilty. And
She's a revolting racist and a really awful person.
So let's go back to this. So I used to have a beef with the ADL. And actually, what you're saying now partly explains it. I used to think to myself, why are they in bed with the intersectionalists, with Kendi, with Robin DiAngelo? Why does their heat map show all these assaults of Jews in Brooklyn and in all the bright blue neighborhoods? But they're constantly talking about Trump being an anti-Semite. And I'm going to let you respond. But one thing I think you're describing, at least I could understand it from a human point of view, is that these causes were so important to us as Jews. I mean, every Jew of my age knows that these were the priorities in our households, not, civil rights, black, that it was easy to get carried along and not actually realize, it's time to get off this train right now. This is just continuing, and the cause may not be as righteous as it once was. That Ibram Kendi and Robin DiAngelo and Kimberly Crenshaw, the intersectionality, these actually not only not causes we want to fight for, but they actually don't like us.
Well, look, this is a lot to unpack.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So, look, number one, I mean, it's not ADL that gets credit for this idea that the Jews should fight for other people. Like it's Hillel that said, if I'm not for myself, it will be, but if I'm only myself, what am I?
Imen ani li mili, v'imeni lo le'atzmi, and if I'm not for myself, ma'ani, what am I? V'im lo achshav, emata. And if not now, then when?
Bravo.
I did advertise our most Jewish episode. I don't think I was exaggerating.
So look, I'm very impressed. I couldn't do it in the original Hebrew, but I think the point is truly that's a very Jewish value of fighting for the other, because we know what it's like, to be a stranger. This is a very Jewish idea. Now, that being said, like we're not, number one, I've never called Trump an anti-Semite. He has a Jewish son-in-law, a Jewish daughter, Jewish grandchildren. So I think there are some paradoxical elements. I don't know about
you did, but the ADL criticized him for, engaging in Jewish tropes and...
Look, I've criticized, and to be frank, let me just say one thing right now. It's for you guys, it's for the listeners. Like, I don't play for the red team or the blue team.
Yeah.
My job is to be the umpire and call balls and strikes no matter who's standing at the plate.
You were playing. Not you. The ADL was playing for the blue team. Maybe not now, but they were.
Well, I try very hard to focus not on politics, but on principles. Mm-hmm. And let me tell you one thing for clear. Like, I will stand up no matter who it is. If you are a bigot or a racist or an anti-Semite, I will come at you with knives, and I'm not going to hold back. That being said, we're living in a moment where it's Jews who have been the ones who've suffered tremendously from this whole DEI industrial complex.
Yes.
I think, without naming names, the people who force our kids to play in the oppression Olympics and choose like team oppressor, team oppressed, everybody loses in the oppression Olympics, particularly the Jews. And sort of these programs that in theory promote, diversity, equity, and inclusion, when they allow bigotry and exclusion of Jews, I have a big problem with that. So I've been outspoken about it. I don't pull my punches.
So why don't you get these local ADL chapters to get, I'm looking at now, Ta-Nehisi Coates, Michelle Alexander.
I've been pretty outspoken on Ta-Nehisi Coates. Like, you can read what I've said, and you can read what we've said as an organization.
These are the recommendations of these chapters. The 1619 project.
So I think what we're talking about are
Kimberly Crenshaw. It goes on, and there's no similarly right-wing things.
Lower
the hammer on these people.
So a few things. So number one, I am definitely don't believe in the kind of equivocation. Oh, you got to do this, you got to do that. Like, this is not for me. This is not for us. My job isn't right and left. It's right and wrong.
Who's Criminy Dickens? Most of you, let's just know who these people are you're talking about.
Fair point.
Who is?
Well, everybody.
All these people you've been naming. Do people just know who they are?
Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Criminy Crimson isn't that Christmas? What's Criminy
Crimson?
People do know, but it also tells us a lot about the people who are writing the lists.
True.
Okay, so tell me who Criminy Crimson is.
Kimberly Crenshaw.
What does she want?
You can tell me.
So Ibram Kendi wrote this book, How to Be an Anti-Racist. He's a professor at BU.
I could write that book.
I like that. No. I would like to hear the sequel by Modi. ladies and gentlemen. No, so he is got some views that we don't agree with.
Okay.
Robin DiAngelo, who Noam mentioned, wrote this book called White Fragility, and kind of the list goes on and on. And at the end of the day, the bottom line is, look, I will fight racism with every fiber of my being, but my job is to protect the Jewish people.
Mm-hmm.
And the anti-Semitism comes from not just the right, but also the left. The anti-Semitism comes not just from the people who, show up, with swastikas. It also shows up from people who claim to be virtuous, and yet the only country who they find unvirtuous is Israel. Yeah. So right or left, my job is right and wrong. And I would encourage I think all of my people believe that. With respect to the books you're talking about, maybe we have work to do.
Yes.
And I'll own that. And what I'll do is commit right here in the Comedy Cellar to do better. Period. End of story.
I believe you would. I mean, I've already taken the measure of you, sort of, and I can tell where you're coming from, and I can see how it happens. But it's so upsetting that these voices are still being treated with respect, because they are really.
Maybe I don't know.
So at the time that Trump said, for instance, something like, I don't understand why Jews are voting for Democrats rather than supporting Israel. We're the party that supports Israel. And people were saying, oh, Trump's engaging in accusing Jews of dual loyalty, and he's engaging in anti-Semitic tropes. And I'm like, no, he's saying what every Israeli I know is saying privately. It's like, why are these Democrats in bed with the people who don't? This is before October 7th, right?
Okay,
Yeah.
And sure enough, after October 7th, all the people we expected to, they immediately on October 8th were attacking Israel, the people that the Jews were fighting for, BLM, right?
Look, so a couple things. So number one, I would definitely tell you that like ADL has gigantic, insoluble problems with BLM. Yeah. The people who are posting pictures of
who's BLM?
Paragliders,
Black Lives Matter.
Black Lives Matter.
So I believe deeply and profoundly that Black Lives Matter. But the Black Lives Matter movement that again would fetishize and sort of elevate these disgusting terrorists from Hamas who butchered and raped and murdered innocent people, I want nothing, not now, not ever, to do with them.
Of course.
Well, I don't know that everybody feels that way, but make double underline, like exclamation point, nothing, not now, not ever. And I do think it's fair to say that ideologues and activists have sort of seized the narrative, and they have warped it in ways that are not just bad for the Jews, no, but bad for America. These people are not just anti-Semitic; they're anti-Western. And look, like I am a ferocious and unapologetic Zionist. But Israel aside, I think America has been the greatest country in the history of the human race for the Jewish people. It has delivered so much to us. So the people who hate the Jews happen to also hate America. They're my enemies, from A to Z.
You want to say something, Modi?
No.
So where are you now? Do you think that Trump is or has ever been anti-Semitic or a promoter of anti-Semitic ideas?
I mean, look, I'm not a fan of the Proud Boys. I'm not a fan of the Oath Keepers. I'm not a fan of many of the people who he pardoned on January the 6th. By the way, they're not fans of us either. I can tell you, they're not listeners of the Comedy Cellar podcast.
No, I think the pardons, especially of the people who are violent towards cops, are an outrage. I don't see it as a Jewish issue, but
it's not a Jewish issue.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm less interested in trying to psychoanalyze President Trump and what's in his heart and his head. What I am interested in, and I'll judge him by, in his actions. And, he is the man who got the Abraham Accords done.
Yeah.
He is the man who signed this executive order about anti-Semitism. He is the man who recognized the reality that our embassy should be in Jerusalem. The U.S. embassy should be in Jerusalem. He is the man who recognized the Golan Heights as a part of Israel. So, like, I give him credit for all those things.
They named the town after him in Israel.
It's not much of a town, to be honest with you.
But then where? Yeah, it's not much of a town, but it's a town. So where are we now then on what many people call a hoax? A hoax may be
the hoax.
The very fine people call it a hoax. The idea that
it wasn't a hoax.
That he was
that he was what?
But that he was praising the white supremacists at Charlottesville. I don't
So
know. I don't use the word hoax, but I think he got a bum rap, considering that he explicitly
Let me put it to you like this.
the Nazis and the white supremacists.
Let me put it to you like this.
Yeah.
That happened in August of 2017.
You remember when that happened?
Sure.
It's hard to believe it was that long ago.
No,
Yeah,
yeah.
I remember it very well.
It's
Really?
August
Yeah, yeah,
2017.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
He had 3 years and several months to clarify what he meant. I don't remember that happening.
Right.
I don't remember in the following 3 years he's saying, you know what? For you people who misheard what I said, let me be clear. That never happened, Noam.
No.
So look, as far as I'm concerned, he got on the record and he never chose to correct that record, even if everyone else was wrong about what he said.
Yeah. So
That's not his nature. I'm not defending him. That's not his nature. But
Look, the press secretary didn't clarify. Like
No,
the comms office, the White House comms office, nobody clarified.
when I play for people the part of his remarks where he says, listen, I'm not talking about the Nazis and the white supremacists. They should be condemned unequivocally. They say, oh, I didn't know he said that. There definitely was horrible relaying of information by journalists and people who had a stake in an agenda to elide that part of his remarks, and they were essential to a fair understanding of what he said. I'm not saying what he said was great, but he definitely didn't say what they accused him of.
tell us what he said.
What?
Tell us what he said.
I just said
The very fine people on both sides.
Right.
He was referring to, it seems like, I think this is a fair interpretation, of the people who were defending their Confederate soldier monuments and things like that, which we know there are Southerners who feel that this is their culture.
Yeah, but there are also black
recently-
people from the South who are not so thrilled with that part of the
no,
culture. too.
I
Recently on my podcast, I came to while we were having the podcast, I came to this conclusion. It like hit me what it is. In Kabbalah, in the study of mystical, there's a
did I say no religious mumbo jumbo? I
no
said
no
specifically.
no you didn't.
I
The
actually
most
said-
Jewish.
No, this is I'm sticking with Dan's most. There's a concept called mati velo mati. It's two things that completely contradict each other but exist at the same time.
Yeah.
Right? And Trump is that. Trump at that inauguration had some guy doing what looked like a Nazi gesture, and at the same time had Israeli hostages on the same stage. Everybody walked away happy. Everybody walked away happy. White supremacists, was this a day for us? Jews, was this a day for us? Everybody walked mati velo mati. It's exactly. They can say, he said, we're fine people, and we can say he moved the embassy. They can say,
No.
Yeah.
If he's
it's
calling white supremacists fine people, that's not acceptable. If he's calling Nazis fine people, that's not acceptable. It's just not.
But obviously,
American
but
president-
obviously it is because
No,
he's the president now.
But I don't think he said that. And as far as it's an interesting issue, we're getting sidetracked here. But if you look at the Japanese, they still lionize their heroes from World War II. It's very normal on a human level. The Germans are really the only ones who managed to not do it. That regardless of whether your ancestors have done terrible things, they're still your ancestors.
Yeah, but I don't want, if the next generation of Gazans lionize Hamas, we all have a problem.
Yeah,
So I just don't, I hear what you're saying, that can often happen, but to me, it's flat out unacceptable.
It's unacceptable, but it doesn't. I'm not disagreeing with you. For instance, the Senator Jim Webb, he used to say, who was a Democrat, I think. He used to say,
he's a former Naval Academy grad.
he said, the Confederate flag doesn't just mean that. The Confederate flag means something to us Southerners. It's who we are. Something like that. And I said, you know what? I don't like the sound of that, but I know you're not a racist, Jim. He's saying, this is, without the Southern identity, we don't have an identity anymore. And this is difficult on a human level. And so when Trump says, listen, there are these people fighting for the Confederate monuments, there's fine people on both sides. I can live with that, meaning I don't agree with them. I think they're wrong, but I'm not going to say they're horrible people. They are people.
Well, I hear you, Noam. I don't want to interrupt.
But Nazis, no, those are not fine people.
But let's go back to that weekend in August of 2017. Remember the tiki torches?
Yes.
Remember the people chanting, Jews will not replace us?
Yes, but was Trump referring to them when he said fine people?
That's what I thought.
Do you know? I mean, do we know?
It seems pretty clear that he wasn't.
I think it was all very fuzzy. I think there were ample opportunities, again, over the next, 3.5 years to clarify, and it never happened. By the way, it's been more than 3.5 years since then, and I still don't recall him ever saying, this is what I meant. So at the end
He's
of the
not
day,
saying that because he moved on from there.
Correct.
And he left those people happy.
and without getting Kabbalistic myself, I think something Modi's saying really resonates, which is we got to move on.
Yeah.
So I want to focus less on what he said 8 years ago and more on where are we right now and where are the Jewish people right now? Because in all honesty, the Jewish people, like it is an inferno of anti-Semitism, what we're seeing in America and around the world, and that's where we need to focus.
So let me play you a clip that got a lot of traction lately. Can you bring up the Ari Shafir clip? You know who Ari Shafir is?
Ari Shavit, I know. Ari Shavir, I know.
He's a Jewish comic.
Okay.
Eli Lake is a big fan of his.
Oh, I know Eli.
None of it's really happening.
And he said
I've
something.
been all
Wait,
over this country.
This was on Howie Mandel's podcast, and Howie Mandel asked him, like, how do you react to all the anti-Semitism that's everywhere these days? And this is what he said, and I'm wondering what your reaction to it is.
Okay.
Go ahead. About a minute long. Go ahead, Tiana.
None of it's really happening.
Are you
I've
fucking
been all over
kidding
the
me?
country. I've seen no actual anti-Semitism. Have you? You look Jewish.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
walked around, people yelled Jew at you or something.
I don't go out.
Yeah, good point.
I don't
I
go
did.
out.
I
but-
yelled Jew at him this morning.
Yeah.
No.
I did.
I think it's real.
No one
I
I
think we
know
got to take it seriously. I think what you're saying is wrong.
No, it's being on the news. Are you familiar with the what's that app that tells you all the robberies in your neighborhood?
Citizen.
Citizen app.
Yeah.
So before this app, everybody was having a great time in their neighborhood. And then suddenly all these housewives are like, there's a robbery every 20 minutes. I can't believe everything's going to shit. They're just aware of it suddenly, the small percentages. It's a little bit in colleges you don't go to. It's not there. It's statistically irrelevant. I go all over the country. I've never seen any anti-Semitism.
Are you on a college campus?
No, I'm not.
Go over to USC today.
Ugh, I'm not on a college campus. Nobody I know is.
Students are.
They're just dumb.
No, you're wrong. Oh, you're really wrong. You're really wrong.
Bro, if you shut the laptop, you'll never see it. You'll never know it exists.
Oh, I believe that you can hide from it. I believe that you can be
Out in
I
the
think
world,
that's enough.
never seeing a single thing. It's just a citizen app. It's just
Okay. What's your?
It's kind of like saying, I don't see the curve, so why do I know that the earth is round?
I will say, sorry.
I mean, it's crazy talk. Like ADL is a very data-driven, evidence-based organization, and I understand this person who I don't know.
He doesn't see it, but
has a particular lived experience, but that doesn't, like he could say, well, I've never been to the Sudan. How do I know that's a real place?
So what would you say?
I've never
to
met
him?
a Sudanese person. How do I know it's a real country?
What would you say to him to disabuse him?
The ADL has been measuring anti-Semitic attitudes since the early 1960s for more than 60 years. And in what does that mean? It means we do sort of attitudinal surveys or sentiment analyses of the general population, non-Jewish.
okay. So if he's not going to look at your data, it doesn't exist.
I get that.
That's what I'm saying to you.
I
He doesn't get. Where is he? He's in the green room of a club or a theater.
Oh, but he reads the papers.
I mean, he has a
But
comedy
he
special
doesn't.
called Jew.
But can I'm telling you? But
Does he
I
really?
Yeah.
understand what he's saying.
he's former.
He doesn't see
He
it.
was.
Never mind
Hasidic.
what he grew up Orthodox, but so I
Hasidic or
understand what
Hasidic, I think.
I understand what he's saying. He doesn't see it. Me and Leo don't allow television, CNN or Fox in the house. We don't get any. So we don't live through the news cycles like. So he's also. That's what he's saying.
Modi, but people listen to him,
Right.
and they say, well, he's a well-known Jew,
Okay.
so we need to have an answer
Right.
to it.
So let me give you the answer.
Yeah.
So, long story short, in the last 5 years, intense or elevated anti-Semitic attitudes have reached the highest levels we've seen since the 1960s when we started doing this work.
How are these measured?
So we do, again, what I would call a sentiment analysis. We work with the University of Chicago's National Opinion Research Center. You survey a representative group of individuals to understand their attitudes towards Jews. You don't say to them, do you like Jews? You ask them a lot of questions, and buried in there are the answers you're looking for. So if individuals agree with, not say like, oh, Jews, like a simple misconception about Jews, oh, Jews are cheap, or oh, Jews, I don't know, own the banks. If they agree with a critical mass of tropes or myths about Jews, we consider that elevated anti-Semitism. In, let's say, 2019, roughly 11% of the U.S. population had elevated anti-Semitic attitudes. By the way, that's a lot of people. Nonetheless, it's within the range we would expect. In 2022, the number went from 11 to 20%. When we did the study last year, 24%. So in 5 years, from 11% of the population having elevated anti-Semitic attitudes to 24%, more than double in 5 years.
Would somebody who thinks that Jews own Hollywood be considered elevated anti-Semitism?
If you think Jews own Hollywood and Jews are cheap and Jews are responsible for all the world's wars and Jews are not loyal to the United States and so on and so forth, you'd have to agree with a large critical mass of those myths.
Can I just say, by the way, regarding Ari's, what he said, I mean, I have a similar experience. I mean, I typically, when I do shows outside of New York, the audience is mostly not Jewish. And I'm always a little frightened, to be honest with you, especially because I read Twitter all the time, and there's just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tweets that are just the most violent anti-Semitism you can imagine. I said, well, some of these people must make their way onto a Princess Cruise, or I did a show in South Dakota, and there wasn't a Jew within 100 miles of the place, and and I did a great job, and they loved me. And after a couple of people after the show asked me, "Are you a Jew?" Which is an inelegant way of phrasing it, but I didn't sense any malice on their part. They're like, I said, yeah. They said, really? Wow. Like Seinfeld. I mean,
look, 40% of Americans, 40% of Americans have never met a Jewish person before. 40%. So if you're here in the Village, you think, well, everybody knows a Jewish person. But like literally.
Is that really true?
Yeah. 40% of Americans have never met a Jewish person. So a Seinfeld rerun, like, George Costanza is as close as they get. For 4 out of 10 Americans, that's a lot of people. It's sad.
So,
But-
my
but-
gosh. So,
so-
no.
but the point is, I didn't really.
So that's
sense-
what I'm. So that's the thing. That's what creates it. You see. So when they see Jews, to them is Larry David looking for an extra egg for his omelet in his club or whatever the scenes are. They don't understand that there's other Jews in the world that are like handsome, good-looking.
Talking
Jews.
about me?
Yeah, about us. They think it's all Larry David looking for an extra egg in his omelet.
Look, I can't speak.
Michael Rappaport said that to us, remember? That he was like, I don't want to perpetuate this stereotype.
Right.
Well, I would say.
Let me tell you something else. So we have attitudes. The ADL also tracks incidents. So since the 1970s, we've been systematically counting the number of calls we get about acts of harassment or vandalism or violence. So this is real world stuff, and every call that comes into us, we investigate. So that's very important.
So it's amazing that you have the two polar opposites. He's not looking for anti-Semitism, and he's the height of looking for anti-Semitism.
Well, I would characterize it not looking, but like
Mati velo mati.
listening.
Mati velo mati.
There you go.
Wow.
Is that? But it's,
Look at
yeah.
Look at that. There's a lot of
No,
Jewish
I was-
How
right
much
there.
has it risen since
So let me answer that question.
October 7th?
So if I go back to, say, 2015, we had about 900 plus anti-Semitic incidents that year. In the year of 2023, we had about 9,000.
Wow.
So again, I don't know this fellow, Ari Shafir, but I can tell you the stuff that we measure and verify. Everything that we report, we have verified. So from 900-ish to 9,000 in like 8 years. And in the 12 months since October the 7th, more than 10,000 incidents. So again, I don't know this guy. He doesn't know apparently any college students or whatever. But the reality is that I can tell you that most American Jews have felt anti-Semitism since October the 7th.
But-
Actually, let me pause here for a
So
second.
he's saying felt or heard of. That's also a thing. Felt or heard of.
So what's the difference? You
So
think?
if you all day long you're on on
Citizen or
Instagram
whatever he's
listening
talking
to Jewish for this and Jewish for that, and
I'm on
your day-
Instagram looking for Modi videos. I'm just going to
Oh,
say.
thank you.
By the way, I was just,
I'm just going to say.
No, but so he's basically saying he doesn't have that. His feed doesn't have that.
Okay.
He's following. I know him. He's a comics comic. He's following every other comic, right? He's not following the Jewish Stand With Me project and all the Bring Them Homes and all of that.
Yeah.
This is in my mind, so it's not in his face like it is in our face. So he's saying it doesn't exist. He takes it in extra measure, as one does, so that it gets viral, right? But he's saying I don't see it.
Yeah, like I don't want to criticize him. I'm simply saying his sort of lived experience is very different than the Jewish college students who I talk to, who tell me they are changing their names in their Uber app
Yeah.
or in DoorDash so they don't sound Jewish. His experience is very different than the individuals have told me who tell me they observant Jews who say we wear a baseball cap and go outside today so no one can see I'm wearing a kippah. I'm talking about Jews not like in North Dakota. I'm talking about
South Dakota.
South Dakota, forgive me. I'm talking about in like Midtown Manhattan. I'm talking about the Jewish people who tell me that, like, I was at Miriam's in Park Slope last night. Do you know why? You know Miriam's? It's a great Israeli-owned restaurant in Brooklyn. It's been around for 20 years. It was vandalized over the weekend. Somebody spray painted, like, like Jews steal cuisine and genocide food and other, like, ridiculous things. So I'm sorry. Like, again, I'm not arguing with this specific person's lived experience, but we got to get off of Instagram and into the world. And in the world where I live, anti-Semitism, anti-Zionism, it is literally creating kinetic consequences that people are living with every day.
Noam, can I ask you? I was just in Las Vegas doing the Comedy Cellar in Las Vegas, located at the Rio Hotel, newly renovated. This was the most Jewish show in Vegas I've ever been on. It was me, Noah Garden-Swartz, Nicole Amy Schreiber, Mark Cohen, and Eric Newman. And you had Greer on. Greer's a black guy.
But he has a Jewish stepfather.
Was this... How did
Greer,
this
the guy
happen?
from television?
Was this an oversight on the part of the bookers of the Vegas room?
Absolutely not.
I don't even know how to answer that. Was an
Because
oversight.
I'll answer that for you.
I'm
Thank you
saying
very much.
usually the shows are more of a mixed grill.
But that's not a Jewish show. That's a show with comedians who happen to be Jewish.
Right.
If it was Jewish comedians, people that go up there and talk only about Jewish stuff through a Jewish vision and Jewish world, through a portal of a Jew, then it would be a Jewish show. It wasn't. It was comedians who happened to be Jewish.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the atmosphere that you're describing, because I would have to say that many people would say, well, if you're complaining about Israel's genocide, that's not anti-Semitism.
It's not first of all, it's not a genocide.
No, I know
blood
it's not.
libel
I'm
of
saying,
it.
No, I'm saying people. Yeah, I don't believe me. The genocide charge makes me insane. I'm so angry about it.
It should.
But yeah,
It's ridiculous.
but people who can be wildly misguided are not only wildly misguided because they're in the throes of anti-Semitic illusions, just like there are people who have these ridiculous pro-Putin views, but there's no like equivalent of anti-Semitism for a ridiculous attitude about Ukraine. So I much of it could be anti-Semitism, but of course the entire younger generation is in the throes of this left-wing political view of the world, and it's anti-Semitism or it's not. But nobody can deny, this is before October 7th, I gave a whole answer about it on some podcast. I was already getting people commenting to me in the olive tree. We have a Star of David in the olive tree, which when I was a kid, it was like an Italian flag at a pizzeria, just an ethnic symbol.
Yeah.
And I noticed sometime around 7-8 years ago, people saying, oh, good for you. Meaning like, you're not afraid, you know? I began to sense a change in the atmosphere that and I remember I used to wear a Tel Aviv University t-shirt, and somehow it seeped into me, I don't know anymore, you know? And then, of course, you could not put a flyer up for any Jewish cause around New York City without expecting it to be ripped down. These are real things. And I think that Ari is wrong if he doesn't understand that it's not, being Jewish now is not what being Jewish was in 1975. It has changed in some very profound way. And he, later in that segment, he talks about, they think another Holocaust is coming. And he's right. I don't think another Holocaust is coming. But just simply not to be able to live in the unashamed way that we did 25 years ago, that my kids who are young, 13 and younger, understand that being Jewish is an issue. I didn't have that concept. My father would try to convince me, and I'm like, what's he talking about? There's nothing he could say to really convince me of it, because nothing in my life reflected it.
Where'd you grow up?
In New York City and then in Ardsley.
Mm.
But then, so having said all that, I think Ari is missing how that's changed. But I also want to say something about North Dakota, and then I'll stop, because this has bothered me for a long time. Many years ago, I noted that if the Democratic Party, where all the Jews were, if that party were simply to become as pro-Israel as the Republicans, I'm sorry, strike that, Tiana. If the Republican Party were simply to become as pro-Israel as the Democratic Party was, support for Israel would collapse in the United States of America, and we'd be in big, big trouble. And I resented the fact that the Democrats, Jews, sat back and indulged their social justice id among the Democrats, while the Republicans were the bulwark. They were the party which was 95% pro-Israel. You wouldn't see anti-Semitism in North Dakota because that's not where the anti-Semitism is. If you look at the heat map of the ADL, I have it. Can you bring it up, Tiana? It's not in Trump country. Put it up, Tiana. It's not in red. This is all in urban areas. This is you can look at every one of those dark green circles and say that's an 80% Democratic area.
So for
and I'm almost and this frustrated me, that with my frustration with the ADL. Like, why are you guys not coming out and calling it for what it is? Anti-Semitism is an urban epidemic. It's not Trump country. You got to search far and wide to find Jews being mistreated in North Dakota. It's in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
It's in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. It's in the areas of Boston. You can look at the map. It's in Portland. It's in Seattle. You can see it on the map right there. Yeah. The whole flyover state, barely. So, and it's very upsetting that let's put it frankly, the people who you described, that we concerned ourselves with, at some point they turned against us. And I think the ADL polls show this, that minority communities are 2-3 times more anti-Semitic or have issues. They feel differently about Jews than other people do. I don't know if they hate Jews. I don't want to cast too much aspersion at them, but there is definitely a difference in the way certain communities feel about Jews to other communities feel about Jews. And we need to handle this head on. And I have another thought too, but I want to let you answer.
So a couple things. Yeah. So can you go back to the map and just put the map on the screen? So for everyone's benefit, at least in the room and the listeners, This is the ADL heat map. It tracks hate, extremism, anti-Semitism, and terror. HEAT, the heat map. This is data over the last 25 or such years. That's looking at different kinds of incidents. The green is anti-Semitism. I think the blue is extremism. The red, I think, is terror acts, etc. So there is absolutely a correlation, a tight correlation between Jewish population centers and anti-Semitism. So we don't have anti-Semitic acts in South Dakota where there are no Jews.
Right.
Well, some of those places, there's no
This
people.
looks like my touring map. If you saw my tours, this is exactly what this is Florida. We're coming to Florida. We have Chicago. This is literally my touring map.
Some of these places, there's no people. I certainly don't expect coyotes
That too. We don't
be
expect that.
anti-Semitic.
Like
you got the
Nebraska.
Mojave Desert there.
That's true.
I guess.
But so the first point to build on what Noam is saying, or to respond to what Noam is saying, is it's absolutely true. New York, New Jersey, Florida, Los Angeles, these are the most anti-Jewish acts, and that's where the Jews are. Yeah. So that's the thing. It ain't Trump or Biden or Kamala or...
You're saying it's us?
No, I'm saying, well, that's a good question. I mean, I think it's also fair to say this is incidents, not attitudes, but like... where Jews are is where acts happen against Jews. So the fact that voting patterns are what they are doesn't change the fact that, look, there are a lot of incidents in Texas and Florida where there are a bunch of Jews in Dallas, Houston, and South Florida. I mean, that is... So I just want to say, I don't think that's a political representation. That's just a simple fact. That's number one. And number two, like, look, at the end of the day, I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to defend BLM that went on the attack against us. I'm not going to defend... By the way, like, it was in Chicago where they had a queer march. It was called, I don't remember what it was called. And they said basically said no Zionists,
It
no
was the
Jews
Dyke
allowed.
March.
Thank you. The Dyke March. And they were like, no Jews allowed. I could tell you.
I will bring in a Rick Chrome joke. He said, well, that was because of violence. He says, if you have a parade, when you mix Jews and gays, you don't get violence, you get Broadway.
We need more Broadway. We need more Aladdin.
Okay, so
and less
He wants to
anti-Semitism.
get serious again.
No, I was going to say, well, let me just finish this thought.
Of course.
So it's certainly true that we have seen these moments which have been ugly and like indisputable. But at the same time, the truth is, Noam, we can never build walls that are high enough. We've also got to build bridges. I mean, for the listeners, Jews are only 2.4% of the U.S. population. If we think we can fight anti-Semitism alone, we're out of our minds. So I am not being so precious to say we can only work with quote unquote traditional civil rights allies. We need to work with evangelicals.
Yep.
We need to work with people from the Church of Latter-day Saints. We need to work with any Republicans and Democrats and African Americans and anyone who's willing to work with us. That's what I think really matters here. The Jewish people have a commitment to justice for all, and we need to work with all to have justice for ourselves.
All right, it says here, Gallup poll for 2023, 49% of Democrats sympathize more with Palestinians, while 38% sympathize more with Israelis, which is not anti-Semitism, but this is just and Republicans, in contrast,
It's just deranged.
78% of Republicans sympathize with Israel, whereas only 11% sympathize more with Palestinians. So my point is, if the Republicans, who we Jews can't stand the Republicans, if they became like the Democrats, 49% pro-Palestinian, you would have the country, basically entire country, pro-Palestinian, and then support for Israel would just crater. It would go into a free fall. Mm-hmm. And there's something that's always bothered me, that we look down our nose at the Republicans. We look down at our nose at the evangelicals who support Israel for religious reasons, just like our Orthodox Jews support Israel for religious reasons, right?
Or oppose them for religion.
They support Israel for the very same reason that we Jews do. But somehow we find because it makes us uncomfortable, so we find a way to badmouth them. They are our bulwark in the United States of America. We should say, God bless the evangelicals. God bless the Republicans. And not only that, they send their kids to fight too. That's a whole nother layer is that so many of the liberal intelligentsia and the elite, they don't send their kids to the army. It's the Republican kids who are going to the army. Actually, to be fair, and minority kids go to the army.
I thought I had ADHD.
What do you mean?
You went everywhere to the army. You went to the army with them. No, but get back to your point. You shouldn't look down at Republicans, right?
The point is that there's a human weakness in not appreciating the fact that the people that you're disparaging are actually responsible for your well-being, for your happy enjoyment of the United States of America. They're sending their kids to the army. They're defending Israel.
But look,
while the people you're voting for stand for the opposite of those things.
The reality is that a lot of people in the armed forces are African American, Latino. I don't know if they identify as Republicans or Democrats, but we need to get past this. Everything is Republican and Democrat. We need to focus again.
I know. It's the whole. Can I just go back to what you were saying about this? So Leo and I, I was doing a show in San Diego.
Oh, do you know he's the important guest here?
I know. By the way,
I think
maybe I don't know. Maybe we're not that off from here. I've been on your podcast when I wasn't the most important. Every guy you found from CNN.
Get it out, goddammit.
No. I will tell you. Where was I? We were staying in a hotel, and in the hotel there was the 250 something anniversary of the United States Marines, and they had all these Marines in their full drag in the hole with the hat
and the
drag? The sword. Yeah, it's drag. It's high drag. It's like with buckles and schmuckles, and Leo and I made reservations for dinner, so we're leaving. We left from the party level, and now we're in the middle of all of these Marines, and I yelled, "Goldberg! Goldberg! Stephen Goldberg!" There's no Goldberg there.
There's definitely no Goldberg. There's no Goldberg.
All right, you wanted to.
I'm thinking about the Marines in drag. I mean, I'm still wrestling with that.
No, we're all in.
There was a great scene. There was a great scene with Harry Enton and Anderson Cooper on CNN. And, Harry was talking about football. He says, "Hey, Anderson, do you like football?" He goes, "I like the costume."
Yeah. Which is also drag. If you've seen that's drag. Everything is everything where RuPaul says you're born and the rest of it, you're born naked and the rest of your life is drag. Whatever look you do to
let's not make too much of this notion that Jews don't serve in the army. We're certainly not as well represented as others.
My dad served in the army.
We're all
Bravo, mine too.
Yeah, that's a different generation. Listen,
we understand what you're saying. We understand what you're saying.
It's a whole different thing. I'll leave the army thing out. Maybe that was my ADD, but there is. We should be scared of what it would mean if if the Republicans were to become just as pro-Israel as the Democrats, and that ought to tell us something. There's something arrogant about
As
the fact.
anti-Israel.
As anti-Israel.
No, I put it
I-
as
I-
pro-Israel because it's not. We're not very pro-Israel. Yeah.
Look, I think at the end of the day, I hope
Oh.
support for Israel is.
I didn't the way you said that.
Yeah.
You said that very Talmudically. If you said that a different way, we read the different. So say it normally. So you're saying
If the Republicans were to become as anti-Israel as the Democrats,
that's it.
Yeah, but-
because you said it.
yeah.
Look,
yeah.
Things shift, and there are somewhat cycles. Look, the truth of the matter is that Harry Truman recognized the state of Israel. John Kennedy provided them tremendous support. So did LBJ. So, like, look, and
I'm not
the
talking about the '69 Mets had good pitching. It's not relevant to today.
it's current. It's what's happening
it's-
now.
So
it's what's
now?
happening now. Where are we now?
Where's the
Where-
fight? Like, what are we?
The Democrats wouldn't even nominate Shapiro. We know why they wouldn't nominate Shapiro.
Josh is great.
They were afraid. They were afraid of putting in the Republican convention. They had Israeli flags. They were petrified what they were facing in the Democratic convention. There was not going to be an Israeli flag. They're in a pickle.
Look, I can't argue. I can't argue. I can't argue with you.
Jonathan,
That's what
by the
there's
way,
something- in the Republican Party, there's really something for everyone.
John-
And the Democrats are much more like,
So we heard for 8 years that Trump was this anti-Semite, and lo and behold, it's the Democrats who can't tolerate anything Jewish at their convention, and the Republicans are like, Israel. And I'm saying there's something really wrong. People tend to see things in a binary way. Even the most sophisticated journalists, they say, okay, which category? Trump is in the bad category.
Right.
So therefore, anything that anybody says bad about him is true. There's no attempt at nuance. He's got to be an anti-Semite. He's got to be pro-Nazi. He's got to be this. He's got to be that. Where that actually wasn't describing who he actually was. He was
Right.
actually the most pro-Israel president we've had in our lifetimes. And his daughter is Jewish, and Jared Kushner, and everybody around him is Jewish. Now, I have a lot to say about MAGA after Trump, the Tucker Carlsons, the Candace Owens, the J.D. Vance. I'm very scared of them.
So you understand? So look what you're saying. So you're saying, but he gives it to everybody. You're saying he has Jared Kushner in his life, and he has Ivanka Trump in his life, and he's got that in his life, but then who else he has in his life? He says Matt Gaetz. So whatever that whole craziness is also there. So there's something for everybody. When he said Matt Gaetz, that nothing crazy could have come out of his mouth except for the words Orville Redenbacher. But he gave that to them.
Let
He gave,
John-
here,
let
all the Meshuggahim, here you go, Matt Gaetz. And
By the way,
Let
Orville
John-
Redenbacher, not an anti-Semite. I'm just going to go.
Is he?
Say that. Not an anti-Semite.
And a maker of a lovely popcorn.
Lovely popcorn.
Lovely popcorn.
So what do you want to say about the
About Orville?
No, about the current, it's got to be uneasy for an organization. I know you don't say you're red team, blue team, but nevertheless,
Look, I'm pretty honest where I come from. So, if you don't know, I worked in the West Wing for President Obama doing economic policy. I ran the innovation office, and one of my first measures, one of my first decisions when I came out of ADL, was it came out against the Iran deal. That was President Obama's big thing. I burned a lot of bridges when I did that.
How did you feel when he gave that first announcement after October 7th? It's true that what they did on October 7th
sad,
is awful. But
sad.
But what? Finish
sad.
it. Finish it.
he said it's horrible what happened on October 7th, but it's also true that the occupation is unbearable.
I mean, look, at the end of the day, there is no rationale, there is no justification, there is no excuse for the barbarity and horror that happened on October the 7th. And like, it frustrates me that the Secretary General of the UN or a former president of the United States or like ordinary college students don't seem to understand that. Like, their rape is not resistance. I'm sorry. Do I need to explain that kidnapping is not a normal course of action under any circumstances? And by the way, like, do you know how many Israeli soldiers were in Gaza on October the 6th? That would be 0. How many Israeli civilians were in Gaza on October the 6th? 0. Other than the ones who'd been kidnapped by Hamas. So, like, look, I have no patience, Noam, 0 for these people, again, who like, the moral confusion just nauseates me, and I have no patience for it.
I'm with you. And I feel like I wonder sometimes whether fighting anti-Semitism is the most effective way to make our point. I hear the accusation.
Well, let me just say, like, I'm the grandson of a Holocaust survivor. My grandfather was from Germany, and he told me when I was a young man that he thought Germany was the best country in the world for the Jews, until it wasn't, and all of his family was incinerated in Auschwitz. and I'm the husband of an Iranian Jew who came to this country in 1987, 88, I think, who lived through the Islamic Revolution, and she lived through the Iran-Iraq War. And my father-in-law thought that America was the greatest country in the world for the Jews. Sorry, thought that Iran was a great country for the Jews until it wasn't. So I happen to believe that America is a great country for the Jews. But the idea that this will just last forever is a fiction. The idea that there's some natural law that my grandfather never would have guessed that his children would be born in America, grandchildren would be born in America, me and my brother and my cousins. My father-in-law never would have guessed that his grandchildren, my boys and my nieces and nephews, would be born in America. And I don't take for granted, and you shouldn't, that your grandchildren will be born here unless we fight for what we have. So like when you say to me like the anti-Semitism, look, I feel like I am on a mission because I want my grandchildren to be born in this country to be as Jewish as they want to be, you know?
So,
They could be atheist cultural Jews, they could be Hasidim, at 770 in Brooklyn. But at the end of the day, my job here is to protect the Jewish people. Period. End of story.
as a matter of
So
strategy,
how do you do that? So give me a second here.
Sure.
Because the man's on a mission. Man just said, my mission. That's a huge statement to make. So now they call you and they tell you, listen, over here we had this incident. It goes on your heat map. You verified it. How do you help? Do you send security out? Do you help? If we know there's a Jewish event happening, will you put security there? How does the ADL help?
ADL does three things. We
Okay.
protect, we advocate, and we educate. So first we protect. So in addition to all the tracking and the measuring, I have a whole team of analysts, Modi, who are literally 24/7, day and night, tracking the extremists, left-wing anti-Zionists, right-wing extremists, armed militia people, radical anti-Westerners, Islamists.
Oh, yeah, we know who.
So literally, they're tracking them on the public web, on the private web, on the dark web. Last year alone, we gave almost 3,000 tips to law enforcement where we identified threats. We could neutralize them before they happened.
Wow. Yeah.
Number two, we train all the law enforcement. We're the largest trainer of law enforcement in America on extremism and hate. Last year, something like 25,000 officers were trained by ADL. Number three, when I talk about advocating, we will not just show up in Congress or in the State House. We are suing the bad guys.
Yeah.
We are litigating against colleges and universities, against K through 12 school districts. We're suing right now the Islamic Republic of Iran in federal court for their role in 10-7. And on top of that, when it happens in a school, we educate. ADL is one of the largest providers in America of anti-hate content in schools. In 2024 alone, 4.5 million kids got ADL education.
Man.
So
that's
we
what you
show
say.
up.
Yeah.
That's what makes us different than everybody else. When shit happens, can I say that?
Yeah.
Okay. When shit happens, when your private school in New York or at your public university or at your workplace, ADL shows up. We show up with
Okay, so
programs,
that's
show
what-
up with
that's what I-
policies.
yeah. So
That's what we do.
So now you understand when you're making a donation to ADL, that's where it goes.
100%.
So, as a matter of strategy, and this actually touches on what Elon Musk got in trouble for that you argued with him. We should get to Elon Musk before we end the podcast. When you tell a Southerner who wants his Confederate statue or wants his Confederate flag, you're a racist, their eyes, glaze over, and they're like, "Fuck you! I'm not a racist," and that's their attitude. But if you say to them, listen, I'm not saying you're a racist, but you have to understand that you have neighbors who are descendants of slaves. Don't you understand what this represents to them? And they'll say, oh yeah, I get that. Maybe I will take it down. And I feel like with the accusation of anti-Semitism is often not as powerful as the demonstration of the anti-Semitism. We're not good at that. And part of the reason we're not good at that.
What do you mean by the demonstration?
Well, I say part of the reason we're not good at that is because our own children don't know the ABCs of our own history. They don't know the first goddamn thing about Israel. They don't know how it is that the territories became occupied. They don't know how hard Israel tried to give it back. They don't know that Gaza's not occupied. They don't know anything.
Right.
So all they have left to say, oh, you're an anti-Semite. And people say, and the people who were criticizing them, many of them are not anti-Semitic, and many of them are filled with this ridiculous revisionist version of history.
Right.
That we have not educated our own children, let alone the Christian children, Our own children don't know how to defend Israel, and this
Right.
is a huge problem. And we're not going to overcome it by calling people names.
Look, so there's a lot to kind of, again, like unpack in that. So number one, let's acknowledge, like a lot of American like high school students don't know how many amendments are on the Constitution.
Yeah.
Like literally don't know what the Constitutional Congress was. So let's just acknowledge, number one, our kids are learning history not from textbooks or the Times, but from TikTok. We all have a problem. Number two, like
So we need to be active on TikTok.
well, there's that as well. The number two, like there is more. I feel like I'm sitting next to Modi, for God's sakes. There is more. Boom. There is like we have Fauda today. We have Gal Gadot today.
Yeah.
We have like Goldies today. Like there is more. We have Tagli and Shinshanim. Like there is more stuff going on with Israel today than there ever was in our history. But we also need to admit, like I need to be a CEO of ADL.
Missions. You forgot the missions.
The missions thing.
The women that went on the women that went on the mission.
I love Modi's
Mission.
bit on the women's missions.
You'd think they were
love
flying F-16s over targets. No, we're going on a mission to Israel. Go ahead.
I
go
love
ahead.
that. But like, look, what I'm going to say here is that like I think the Jewish establishment needs to acknowledge we have failed. We haven't succeeded. We haven't succeeded in giving our kids the kind of education and training they need to be effective in this world. Now, I think the one challenge is that most of us in America didn't realize that we were dealing with not just an entrenched, but a hostile, militant movement that seeks, again, not equality, but superiority over us as Jews. Again, this is why I think anti-Zionism is so pernicious and so dangerous. Zionism didn't start, I'm in 1948. Zionism didn't start with Theodore Herzl. Zionism is essential to our identity as Jews.
Next year in Jerusalem.
Baruch Hashem, right? Like in every Siddur, in every shul on the planet Earth, on every page, it's like Yerushalayim, Zion, Eretz Yisrael.
Okay, so but that to finish you off, I'll re-zamp this around. I'm on the next level of you. Yes, it's important to have the number one goal for Jews.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not Jewish education and Jewish preventing anti-Semitism and all that.
Definitely
Those
not.
are not. The number one goal of Jews is Mashiach. We should be living in a messianic era. And that's all that Yerushalayim stuff means, that we're living in Jerusalem because of the Messiah, not because it's our land. It's our, we can go move there now if we want.
Right.
But to live there, it really is a metaphor for being in a messianic era.
Right.
And that's when everybody works in harmony.
Can I ask a religious question? Is it a Jewish law to live in the land of Israel?
No, unless the Messiah is here. But so when you're saying let's go all next year in Jerusalem, it's like saying next year let's be in a messianic era.
Correct. It's the hope. It's the yearning for Moshiach. So I do think, by the way, like, look, I keep kosher. Don't blame anyone who doesn't. But like many Jewish people have lost their rituals and aren't in touch with Torah.
Yeah.
But then on that note, I'll tell you, it's wonderful to see. Sometimes the whole Jewish experience is going to see Modi, or maybe just buying a challah and putting it on the counter on Friday, and even not eating it, but it's something that reminds me of Shabbat.
Yeah.
It's not all or none. I always say we're not the chosen people, we're the choosing people. This works for me on Friday, but on Thursday I'm going to eat pork. So whatever works for you, you do, and just remember that you're Jewish. And
I don't eat milk with meat, but I do eat milk with meat rather. But I draw the line at boiling a calf in its mother's milk.
Okay, so everybody has their own thing.
I'm not so big into boiling calves myself.
Yeah, never boil the calf in its milk.
Are you almost over with the podcast? I have to.
No, we got to keep going.
How much longer does the podcast go?
We got 3 hours.
I want to hear
like Lex Friedman.
I want to hear what you feel about Elon Musk.
What do I feel about him?
Because I know because you went to war with him and now you've been defending him.
I wouldn't say a war. A little skirmish, maybe. I wouldn't say a war.
Yeah.
Look, Elon is an extraordinary guy on many levels. I don't agree with everything he says.
Have you met him in person, Mother?
I've met him via Zoom, and talked to him on the phone and texted him and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Look, he's a complicated guy. He's an extraordinary entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's an ingenious inventor. And I don't always agree with his politics.
And he is a complete upgrade from the MyPillow guy that Trump was hanging out with.
Baruch
He's
Hashem.
the big upgrade from the My Pillow guy. No, I'm laugh, you son of a bitch.
on.
That's funny.
I love that.
Miserable no, I'm laugh.
He had texted.
I'll be in Phoenix on February. Phoenix, February.
He had texted a year ago along the
Yeah.
same lines. Where he said the ADL unjustly attacks the majority of the West, despite the majority of the West supporting the Jewish people in Israel. This is because they cannot, by their own tenets, criticize the minority groups who are their primary threat. It's not right. It needs to stop. So what Musk was saying was that the ADL, now this has changed right since October 7th, that the ADL was holding its fire against the people who hated the Jews the most. And then he retweeted some like white supremacist, but I believe that he didn't realize who he was retweeting.
Look, again, I don't know what's in his head or his
I
heart.
can't believe he has time to tweet and look at the tweet.
Well, but we,
No.
well, we do know
I
he,
can't. It takes everything I have to look at that thing. I don't know who's time to.
but we do know that he made a beautiful video complaining about the way people are raised with anti-Semitism in Gaza, that he's gone to visit Israel, that he's
Yeah.
He went to Auschwitz.
Yeah.
Mati velo Mati. It's really Mati velo Mati.
It
It's
is Mati Veloma.
It's
really,
that.
It really doesn't seem like he's even at all unfond of Jews. It seems like he's pretty sympathetic to.
Modi, you say what? You
No, I'm in Baltimore on March 1st. I'm in Baltimore.
So go ahead. Tell us
My
about
map. This is my.
I love it's the Modi map.
No,
The
this
heat
is
or
the
Modi
map that is on UTA on Modi's comedy touring route.
well, do not
This
look for
is the
Modi
map.
in Ottawa, apparently, or is this only an American?
We
map?
did Ottawa. It was a lovely Jewish community there. Lovely,
what I hear.
lovely.
So
Look, I'm going to tell you something. So a couple things.
don't forget the salute. You know.
No.
Yeah.
So look, number one, I think Elon is a complicated guy. I was public about what I thought about the salute, which I think,
What'd you say?
I didn't think it was intentional.
Okay.
But what's real is the impact that many Jewish people felt was, and what many white supremacists felt was, he was, singing their praises.
Yep.
So look, at the end of the day, I'm going to judge Elon not by what's in. Again, I don't know what's in his head or in his heart. I'm judging by what he does. He went to Israel. He went to Auschwitz. I appreciate that. He's taken a stronger line in some ways on X, and on the other hand, there's stuff on X that's really still very bad. So there's room for improvement. But we're going to talk about this, and we're going to push on this as much as we can, and just hold people accountable for what they do.
Noam on I still call it Twitter, but he made the. First of all, there's a lot of photos going around of people with their arms out, like it's very easy, like you're waving.
Yeah.
The picture of Kamala Harris doing it. Many people.
Yeah.
You're waving, and
No, but
Noam
some of those are
felt
quite
that
unfair.
it was.
But there is one of Tim Waltz actually doing exactly the same thing as Musk's video. The photo of somebody waving is not what
Look.
Musk did. Musk did a whole thing.
Yeah. Look, again, I think it's not that useful to psychoanalyze what he was saying because we don't know. But here's what I do know.
But how
Let me
come
just say
he
one
didn't
thing.
clarify? How come he wasn't like, I know a lot of
He
you guys.
did.
Like, no, look.
He
look,
said something about the thing. Oh, he says, my heart. I'm sending you my heart. By the way, I just so you know, when I finish my show, I did standing ovation.
Tell me.
And then
Every
I
time.
put the mic down and I do like, thank you so much.
Whoa.
My heart. I really say that. And you see it in my gestures.
Look, I think the reality is that I think at ADL, like I said, balls and strikes. I don't know what he was thinking. I think it appeared to be unintentional, but the impact was real. And that's that. At the end of the day, by the same time, when he did the thing about he did the word play on the names of Nazis, you'd see the next day. Yeah. I called that out because it was wrong.
Oh well, I thought it was funny.
The impact was real.
I actually did think it was funny.
Something else.
I don't think the Holocaust is a punchline. I don't. That's
But Mel Brooks did.
Not the
Mel
Holocaust.
Brooks did.
Hospital.
Mel Brooks made jokes like that. I mean,
It's so now.
Woody Allen, everybody,
I always say if you can include the Holocaust in a joke, do it so people know and remember it. And then some people who don't know what you're talking about, they Google it. I have now in my act, I'm using as a doctor's name, Joseph Mengele.
He's one of your doctors.
It's so right. So you saw the show, right? So people who know who it is like that, and those who don't know, they'll go, "Who's Joseph Mengele?" And then you can go Google who Joseph Mengele is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Candace Owens says Mengele is a hoax. I want to defend Musk a little bit more
Candace
strongly.
Owens is just the worst.
Yeah.
I have big problems with her.
She went to the same
She
high
doesn't
school
like me.
as both me and Allie.
Really?
Yeah, Stanford High.
Were you guys in class?
No, this was
together?
years after I had graduated, but
She went to Stanford High.
yeah, she did.
I want to
wonder
say
what
in
kind of student
defense of
she was.
Musk, and then I'll be finished. I think it's not enough to say we don't know what's in his heart. We actually do know what's in his heart.
No, I just meant with respect to when he made that gesture. I was
Yeah.
thinking there are plenty of people who I know who know Musk, who've criticized what he did. There are other people that I know who know Musk who said it was unintentional. Look, at the end of the day, I don't think it serves us well in this moment to be going back in time to try to do the forensics on that. Let's focus forward on where we are.
As a comedian, I think to myself, like that whole day, could you imagine? Like, I'm sure it was like Musk was like, I'm going to do this thing here. Trump's like, you're going to do it? No, you won't do it. You're not going to do it. And then when because he did it early in the morning, right? And later on they go, did Elon do it? He did it. He did the thing. He did it. I knew he was going to do it. He did it.
I only want to say as to the issue whether the impact was real, that's not actually fair to him, because the impact was real only because people reported him as having doing something which there's no evidence he did. And if someone on the left had done that, someone who was not in that category of people binary that we decide are bad people, there would have been no story about it, and there would have been no impact. The impact is fabricated by people who hate Musk. That's
Look,
what bothers me.
I will just say that
But we're finishing.
ADL saw someone do that in the same way that he did, who was not.
If Barack had done it, you would have just assumed that you would have made the assumption that it was not the Nazi salute.
Well, look,
there's people in like camps in the middle of like nowhere where they do it with the Nazi shirt on.
He said, I want to thank you from my heart. There's nothing Nazi about it.
Right. So we're in agreement
Listen,
on that.
Biden famously once said to people, if you don't vote for me, you ain't black. Right? This was exactly the mirror image of what Trump said. If you don't vote for me, you're a bad Jew. There was no wild accusations of Biden being a racist. There was no impact from it.
So he said.
Because everybody assumed if Biden said it must be okay. They're dying to catch Musk on something. I'm not a huge Musk fan. Obviously.
But you love his automobile.
I love his automobile. I love his accomplishments. I have a Tesla. It's the best thing I've ever owned in my life. But obviously, he's erratic. He tweets carelessly. He throws. I mean,
again, I stand by what we said.
Yeah.
And what we said was that like we thought it was not intended to be, and yet at the same time, the impact, again, whether intentional or not, it happened. People went crazy with it, and now we just got to move forward.
Yeah,
exactly.
But I admire you for standing up for him. I thought it was great that you guys did that. And it had a big impact that you did that.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
It's ADL.
So look, I want to make sure that I mention on the podcast, Never Is Now.
Yeah.
So ADL runs.
We're going to pull that up on the screen.
Oh, super great. Let's do
Something I
that.
believe in here.
So ADL runs every year. Modi, we would love to have you.
I was going to discuss it with you in a minute.
Let's talk about
how
that.
we haven't. No, the
It's not on the heat map, but I want to move that.
The fact that I have never done an AD, I have done everything from ABC, AJ, BJ, CJ, GJ, JJC, GCC. How have I never been on the ADL stage?
Give me your hand. I am going to
I'm not
correct
looking
that
for
right
my hand.
here.
We're going to
America, listen and listen well.
Donate to the
correct that.
ADL so they can afford to bring me to the. Don't listen to me. Don't everything. Make Mashiach energy happen. Make a comedy show at the ADL. Get your donors. All the big donors should make a check. And we'll
shut up
come.
for a second. Let him tell about the event, please.
So
I'm gonna
ADL runs every year the largest
map.
largest conference in the world on anti-Semitism. It's called Never Is Now. We'll have 5,000 people at the Javits Center on March 3rd and 4th,
No.
2025. And God willing, we'll have Modi lead.
So here's what they do now, Noam. Listen to this. Instead of hiring me for these things, they say, we're going to give you an award. they give me some fushtinkin Modi. You're
Did someone
not.
tell him? Did someone tell him?
Is that what it is? They bring an award. So listen to
Hold on a second.
Okay, go ahead.
Modi, I just want to say to you, so we're doing this big thing, and I want to tell you right now, we'd like to give you the Leadership in Comedy Award. It's a new award. You'll be our inaugural recipient. We call it Champions of Comedy. Modi, ladies and gentlemen,
Exactly.
I'm breaking news right now. We'd like to give you this award.
I'm breaking news to you right now. Call Leo and make sure the date is available. I can't.
So let me tell you
bring my
something.
map back on.
Bring your map. So, like, Noam, I'm excited to have the chance to share this with the audience. It's a really big deal. Again, we'll have a lot of folks. We've created a discount code for your listeners. So if they go to adl.org, they can register and use the code COMEDY20, and they'll get a discounted rate on tickets that's available only to the listeners of this podcast.
And what's the date of this event?
It's March 3rd and 4th, Monday, Tuesday, 2025.
At the Javits Center
At the Javits Center
in New York City.
In New York City.
And I apologize too for not. If I'd known that, I would have put it further towards the beginning of the
No,
podcast
it's
because
okay.
some people fall off. But maybe there's some way we can
Bring this to the front. Yeah.
put it towards the
People are going to be riveted to this whole thing. I mean,
March 3rd and 4th.
March 3rd and 4th. Check the dates.
I'm in the date. Right now.
Text Leo. I'm going to text Leo myself.
So listen, Mr. Greenblatt.
Please.
I really am very honored to meet you. And it seems like the organization is becoming a little bit more like Switzerland now. Really kind of not wanting to get sucked into the gravitational force of either party and either party's agenda. Really just clear-eyed on what's best for not just the Jewish people, but for people who are victims of bigotry and hatred anywhere they are. Because
Look, if we haven't been true to that, then we're at fault.
yes,
If we haven't been effective in defending everyone, we got to own that. The reality is I get up every day, and from the time I lift my head from the pillow to the time I put my head to the pillow at night, I have one job to do, which is protect the Jewish people. That's it.
To bring us closer to Mashiach. And I have a job too, and I wake up in the morning to sell tickets.
but wait,
No, listen to
you
me.
said to protect Jewish people, but also
My
to
math.
fight bigotry.
Let me be clear. I believe I can best protect the Jewish people by fighting bigotry and all forms of hate in America. I think, again, America can live up to its potential and its promise when it is a place where, regardless of where you're from or how you pray or who you love, when you are able to show up as your full self. So yeah, I'm against not just anti-Semitism, but all forms of bigotry and hate. And by pursuing justice and fair treatment to all, I can protect the Jewish people. And that's my job.
You alluded to, Germany was the best place for the Jews until it wasn't.
Right.
Iran was the best place. If you believe that America could go down that path, where does that inform your opinion on the Second Amendment, or do you have an opinion?
Two things. Number one, I literally wrote a book called It Could Happen Here. I wrote it 2 years ago. I can't believe I didn't bring copies for all of you, focused on this very topic because I think it could happen here. With respect to the Second Amendment, look, I think Jews have the right, like every other American, to have access to firearms, and they can do that. I don't
The
like
Second Amendment, the guns.
guns.
Yes, the gun.
Jews are buying guns like you've never. Noam, they're buying
true.
not guns. They're buying cannons, cannons. Buying shotguns. I can't tell you. No, every Jew I know.
How do you know this?
I know all of them. They're buying the number one top on Madison Avenue. There's a shop above this clothing store, and every Syrian Jew has. I was there because I saw it. Like my friend was going, and I go, "Where are you going?" I'm going to this upstairs. They sell shotguns. You don't have to aim. You just boom, and you can blow the barn
Shotguns
off, right?
do that. Shotguns do that.
And this guy comes over and is explaining to him how the gun works and the barrel and this, and then he's looking at him, and I said, "Aren't you listening?" He goes, "No, it's all on YouTube. It's all on YouTube." He's gonna go home and play on YouTube with this gun.
right.
He's gonna blow his wife's kitchen into the living room.
So look, like I believe
But they're
the
buying
Second-
guns. To answer your thing, Jews are buying guns.
Yeah, and I believe the Second Amendment, but the reality is, I would also just say there are 340 million Americans, give or take. There are over 400 million guns in the United States. Like, I think that's crazy. I think it's a problem, and I don't have the answer to it, but it worries me a great deal when there are more firearms in this society than people. Like, that's the wrong calibration.
Well, whoever's into guns doesn't have just one; they have a whole bunch. They have. When we were looking for,
But they're
a
not
house,
like
when we were looking
stamps
for a
or
house in
comic
Connecticut.
books.
You get to some of the house and you see this massive, like, what's it called? Like a vault. They're the vault for the gun. So whoever's a gun owner has more than
a
a big locker, a safe, like a real safe,
Yeah.
and that's where they keep the guns. So
Yeah.
we knew we were in a house of a gun owner.
All right, we got to wrap it up. I actually don't think it can happen here. That's not my worry.
Good.
My worry.
Depends on what it is, I think, right?
I mean, I don't see Jews being rounded up and killed. I mean,
Would you have ever guessed 2 years ago that Jews at UCLA would be blocked from walking across the quad? Would you have ever guessed that at Columbia that Jews would be harassed on site?
Yes. And Periel would tell you, I that didn't shock me at all.
Right.
That kind of anti-Semitism, I felt was right below the surface on the left all along.
So that's what I say, the expression never again.
Yeah.
So the never again is not that they're not going to beat us and harass us on campuses or try to fight us or kidnap us. That's
Yeah.
going to happen. The never again is you don't just get away with it. So all of these universities,
that a lot.
all the universities that had that situation, 3 presidents, we saw those ugly women taken off, right? The 3 presidents of Harvard, MIT, and UPenn. Those novellas, they were taken out, right? When you do stuff like this, there's consequences now. That's the never again. That's the never again.
Bravo.
Yeah.
Bravo.
Yeah.
So that's making never again work for us, and I really like that a lot.
ModiLive.com. All of your tickets, you can get them.
Wrap it up, Dan. Go ahead.
That's yeah.
Well, I promised you the most Jewish podcast episode we've ever done, and I delivered in grand style. We thank Modi. Tickets available ModiLive.com.
Instagram, Modi
thank,
_live. Modi _live.
We thank Jonathan Greenblatt from the Anti-Defamation League for joining us. And, of course, Periel and Noam. And Tiana, sorry.
Tiana, I just met her.
Tiana, she's doing our sound work backstage, or back behind the wall there, behind the partition.
And Periel for making sure that no camera was behind my head for my bald spot.
That's it for us. Thank you. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.